If you're looking for rocks that will throw sparks off a piece of carbon steel for doing like the flint and steel, you can just just find some place that has gravel. It could be your driveway, it could be a landscape yard, it could be an old gravel pit, or in this case this is just an old abandoned railroad bed. And a lot of these rocks will throw sparks. I'm not sure what this is. I believe this is granite, and it will throw a spark if you get a good nice sharp edge on it. But it's a little bit I don't know, a little bit grainy, a little bit crumbly. But if you look through here, you'll find rocks that will work. And I'll just take a known piece of steel that I know will throw a spark off a chunk of flint, and I'll just test it on these rocks. Or if I'm out, I'll just pick up some rocks that look like they might work. I found some nice pieces of chert or flint that were good enough for striking the flint. I mean, most of the flint and steel videos you've seen me do, the flint really wasn't flint. It was just a rock that I grabbed up off of my driveway or out of a flower bed, or off an old railroad bed or something. Just wherever I happen to see rocks, I pick them up and test them out. Here's probably a good one. This one looks like it wants to have those conchoidal fractures, which what that means to me is if you've ever shot if you've ever seen a BB or a rock or something hit a windshield, it makes kind of a round impression. It breaks off flakes. It doesn't really work on windshields anymore, but because they're safety glass. But another way to test it is tap it on some other rocks, and the more glass-like it sounds, the better it will be. But there's some that don't sound like glass at all, and they work fine. Here's a nice little flake. This looks like a piece of that granite. This would be kind of small to try and use, but this would definitely throw sparks because it's got a nice sharp edge on it. But if you're looking to do the flint and steel, I mean, you don't need flint or chert, Those, for me, those are more reserved for actual flint knapping, because you need a good quality piece of rock that will not just crumble. But a lot of these rocks will work for flint and steel. I mean, I've used rocks that were 20 different colors, anywhere from black to brown to red to white. Some were grainy, some were smooth, some made conchoidal fractures, some didn't. But as long as they had a sharp edge, most of them worked. A little chunk of coal. This is an old fossil. This might work, I don't know. Probably not. Here's a nice one. See, I have no idea what this is. It's black in the core, and it has a cortex on it on the outside, so I think that may actually be a type of chert or flint. But it's really poor because it's all crumbly from being out in the weather and freezing and thawing and getting moisture in it. But for the flint and steel, this will work fine. You just hit on that with another rock until you get a nice sharp edge. You don't really need to know anything about flint knapping. You can, through trial and error, eventually get a sharp piece that will work. But that's it, there's not a whole lot to the flint and steel. I know I thought for a long time that I needed the perfect rock to make that happen, but you don't. You just need pretty much any rock that is good and hard. You know, I've heard people say that you want a hardness of 7 on some scale, but really when you're out in the woods, you don't have no way to test the hardness. All you can really do is strike it on a piece of steel and see if it works. I mean, that's the way to test it. I don't think granite has a hardness of 7. I'm not really sure. I'm not up on my rocks, but it does work. It just doesn't work very good. Not only that, I mean, a lot of these could be used as tools, crude tools for skinning an animal or processing some small game. When we were kids, this is, you know, we would do this for fun. We'd come out and hunt down some animals and just find stuff in the wild that we could use to process them and cook them and stuff. Of course, back then we had a lighter and matches. There's a bean. You got to be careful with these beans. I've heard of people eating unknown beans as a test to see if they're edible, and that's probably not a good idea, because in the pea family, the bean family, they're one and the same. There's a lot of poisonous plants, and there's just a huge variety of pea family plants, so you got to be careful because there are a lot of poisonous ones in there, and I think some of them can kill you, but probably most of them would just make you sick or somehow deprive you. There's a piece of chert right there. It's very small. That would be tough to use for the flint and steel, but you could do it. I've used pieces this small. It's just not as easy because there's not much to hold on to. You end up skinning up your knuckles and stuff, but you know, if you were in a situation, you know, fire is more important than not having skinned up knuckles. A lot of these rocks will be too crumbly to use, but you will find some that are good. See, I don't know what this material is, but it's smooth, and it somewhat has the appearance that it makes those conchoidal fractures. If you want to know what a conchoidal fracture is, just Google it. You'll see pictures and explanations. It's a term that's mostly used for flint knapping. But that's all I'll do. I'll just go out and, you know, grab up 5 or 10 different rocks, and if I don't have my steel with me, I'll just take them home and practice with them there and see if they work. Most of them do. Out of every 10 rocks I gather, I'd say probably 6 or 7 of them work for the flint and steel. The steel is the most important part of the equation with the flint and steel. It's not so much the flint as it is the steel that you're using. I have a knife that is 01 tool steel, and it was probably treated properly and tempered properly, and it works really good. It just throws amazing sparks, and I have some old files and stuff that really don't work very well. But even this, I mean, this is just a rock that I picked up, but it's got an edge on this side, it's got an edge on this side, and it's got a sharp point right here. I mean, I could make a weapon out of that. It'd be very crude, but it would work. Yeah, see, that's a nice one right there. It's got some really sharp edges on it. And it's definitely got the conchoidal fractures. This would be a good one to take home. I could bust that in half and get 2 or 3 nice pieces of rock for making a flint and steel fire. Piece of sandstone. You can use that to sharpen your knife. It's kind of rough right now, but if you take it on another rock and rub it, you can get a nice flat surface on there, and that'll make a real good knife sharpener. I think I'm actually going to keep that because I have a hard time finding sandstone for some reason. When I was a kid, I found it everywhere. Now that I actually want some, I can't seem to find it. That's all I do. I just feel the edge. Does it feel sharp on my hand? Does it feel hard, like it's not going to crumble? What kind of sound does it make when I hit it on other rocks? But there's really no science to it. It's just pick up a rock, strike it on your steel, and see if it works. I mean, that's what the people do that rely on this stuff. But you can find a lot of nice pieces. This is really small, but I could possibly nap that into a small point to be used for, you know, stabbing fish or something. Frogs. For fishing frogs, it's nice to have a gig where you have an actual barb on the blade, because that'll help keep them from getting off. And really, a piece of bone would probably be the best thing for that, because you can shape a piece of bone pretty easily. You can make it nice and long, and you can put a barb on it. That way when you stab it into the fish, you turn it like 45 degrees and or 90 degrees, turn it 90 degrees, and kind of sets that barb in the fish so he can't get off. The bone's a little bit fragile, but as long as you're somewhat careful. See, there's another piece of that black chert or flint or whatever it is. Pitch black. I'm going to take that one home. Find a lot of fossils too when you're out here. I have no idea what this is. It looks it's like some sort of a tube. Could have been a plant. Could have been some kind of sea creature. No way of telling. Especially here in Michigan. Because for one, I have no idea where these rocks came from. And for two, this whole area used to be a big, massive lake or ocean. Used to be under, I think, hundreds of feet of water right here, if I'm not mistaken. There's another piece of chert. Small though, I'm finding little small pieces. But these have potential for some use. Some other type of fossil. No idea what it is. But that, you know, when it comes to napping or making a primitive weapon or tool for hunting, I think in the area where I lived, the native people, they probably didn't, except for trade, because they did have trade routes and stuff, and they traded with other tribes and other communities. I'm thinking, I bet a lot of their tools were just made out of wood or bone, and not flint or chert. I'm thinking the flint and chert was probably reserved for decoration or like ceremonial stuff. You know, I'm not that up on native history as much as I'd like to be, but bones and wood are a much more widely available resource, and when you're living out in the wild or whatever, you can't be real picky about stuff. You got to use what's available to you. I'm sure stone tools were quite valuable back then. Another piece of sandstone. See, that would make a nice sharpener. Just about like a wet rock, except, you know, you just need to smooth it out on, you know, take it on another rock, rub it till it's nice and flat if you want, so you can get a nice good edge on your knife or whatever, or a piece of bone. There's a lot of other rocks you can use for that. I mean, you could use granite, really, or whatever that is. When it comes to rocks, I never did pay much attention to what they were, what the names of them are, but I just look at the rock and see if it will work for what I need it to work for. Quartzite is a good one for the flint and steel, but I don't find a lot of it. And it's usually a pretty small piece when I do find it. And it seems to hold up a little better than some of the other rocks I've used, and it definitely throws some nice sparks. Another piece of chert or some kind of flint-like material with conchoidal fractures. I'll take that one home. Looks like it's pretty crumbly though, but it'll work for flint and steel. Use it a few times, and when it doesn't work no more, pitch it and grab up another one. I actually found a nice core that you know, somebody at some point had napped away little blades around the edge, and I don't know if it would be considered an artifact or not, but I ended up knocking some more flakes off of it. Didn't even consider that it might be some type of artifact. I just picked it up and knocked a few flakes off of it. It's kind of neat though, because it still worked after all these years. Now there's a nice piece, and it's almost big enough to be used for the flint and steel. I don't think I'll save that one. I don't know much about napping, but I'm trying to get into it. I want to learn some more about that, and also making knives and stuff. I want to get more into making tools for wilderness living. Find a rock like that that looks rusty. I have no idea what this is, but that has potential to be whacked against another rock to create sparks. I know this works because I found some of these before, and you just strike these against another chert or flint-like piece of rock, and you can make sparks with rock on rock. And there's lots of different types of rocks that will have rusty spots in them. Sometimes it'll be just little bitty rusty spots throughout the rock. Sometimes it'll be a big streak. But that's another good thing to look for, you know, because maybe you lose your knife or something and you don't have a piece of steel. This way you can use the rock to make your spark. But it's a lot tougher to do than using a good piece of steel. but it depends on what your resources are, how much you gotta work for it.